Hello and welcome to the day ahead. It is Monday, July the 28th. I'm Andrew Gagan. Well, the local market is set to begin the week with a modestly lower opening, with ASX futures off by just 5 points. Optimism around global trade deals encouraged positive sentiment among investors on Friday, although European shares ended lower before a US-EU tariff deal was agreed to on the weekend. On Wall Street, investors also considered this week's Federal Reserve policy meeting and the latest quarterly earnings. The S&P 500 and Nasdaq extending their record high closes on Friday, with the S&P setting a closing record 5 days in a row. For the week, the S&P was up 1.5%, the Nasdaq 1%, and the Dow rose almost 1.5%. Among the Mag 7, and Apple and Microsoft rose. That is ahead of their results this week, including also Meta and Microsoft. Shares of Intel tumbled on Friday after the chipmaker forecast steeper quarterly losses than expected and announced plans to slash jobs. Decker's Outdoor beat quarterly estimates with strong demand in international markets. Charter Communications shares slumped after the cable giant reported a deeper than expected broadband subscriber loss, hurt by competition from wireless carriers. Paramount Global shares dipped after the US regulators approved its $8.4 billion merger with Skydance Media. And health insurer Centene rose after it said it expects to deliver improved profitability in its 3 government-backed health care insurance businesses in 2026. Well, the United States has struck a framework trade deal with the European Union on Sunday, imposing a 15% import tariff on most EU goods. The deal includes $600 billion worth of EU investments into the United States and a $750 billion of EU purchases of US energy over President Trump's second term. That rate will cover EU car exports, but not steel and aluminium, which will still attract a 50% tariff. Meanwhile, US and Chinese negotiators will meet in Sweden later today to try to hammer out a trade deal between the two economic giants, with China facing an August 12th deadline imposed by President Trump. US economic data has shown an unexpected decline in new orders for core capital goods as companies held back on big-ticket purchases amid the trade uncertainty. And the Federal Reserve is expected to leave its federal funds target rate at in between 4.25% and 4.5% range when it meets this week, despite pressure from the president to cut rates. US Treasury yields eased on Friday as investors prepared for a data-heavy week. The yield on the US 10-year note was at 4.38% and the 2-year at 3.91%. And the US dollar strengthened while the euro was up slightly in the wake of the trade deal. The Aussie is trading at 65.7 US cents. And Bitcoin is trading at around 119,000 US dollars. Oil prices eased on Friday, settling at a 3-week low as traders worried about negative economic news from the US and China amid signs of growing supply. Brent crude futures down more than 1% at $68 a barrel. Copper fell close to 0.5%. Iron ore slumped almost 2% to $102 a tonne. And gold was weighed down by a stronger US dollar and progress in global trade negotiations. Spot gold down 1% at $3,335 an ounce. Well, ahead locally this week, today CommSec releases its State of the State report. On Wednesday, the all-important Consumer Price Index for the June quarter, followed by retail trade for the quarter, as well as building approvals for June, private sector credit and international trade prices for the June quarter, and Friday sees producer prices for the June quarter and national home values. Overseas, Tuesday, US home prices, job openings and consumer confidence. Wednesday, the Fed Reserve hands down its interest rate decision, as does the Bank of Canada. Wednesday also sees US economic growth data for the June quarter, as well as private payrolls. Thursday, the Bank of Japan makes its interest rate decision, and China's PMIs for July are released. And we also get core PCE price index out of the States, and on Friday, the manufacturing index for July and US non-farm payrolls. That's your week ahead. See you again tomorrow.